back to the manual video recording, so thank you all. We are reconvening for our regular business meeting portion of the evening for March 10th, and we will start by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have roll call. Councilor Connect? Present. Councilor Cameron?
Here.
Councilor Evans? Here. Mayor Weinberg? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Gentry? Here. Councilor Hahn?
Here.
Councilor Krasinski? Here. Mayor, you have a quorum? Thank you. Next, we'll approve the agenda. There's been no changes, so we will continue with the agenda as has been presented and move right into public comments. We do have 3 public hearings this evening, so we will reserve comments on those topics for later in the meeting, but this is for any other topics for council, and I don't believe we received any via email, so if anybody would like to speak to council, I have 1 person signed up. You're welcome to, Jay, can't read it. Jay, if you'd like to come up to the podium, address your remarks to council, you have 3 minutes. And please start by stating your name and your neighborhood or address for the record.
My name is Jay Tasnick, and I live at 86 DeFrance Way in Golden, just up there in the north, or Heritage Dells neighborhood. The reason I wanted to speak tonight was because my wife and I are totally into the WRC, the Wildfire Resiliency Code. We're very happy that Golden is adopting this. When we decided to do a renovation, it was important to us to harden our structure as well. So also with the Marshall Fire in our rearview mirror, Lahaina, Paradise, our property abuts Apex, and since we moved here in 2016, all I've watched is the fuels grow. And we had a fire in 2019 that was small and inconsequential, but you put all the right ingredients, like with the Marshall Fire, and it could have been a different story. For us, I think it's not a matter of if, but when we have a fire. So when we were doing research, we made sure that we put a metal roof on, Class A cement board siding, stone veneer, metal deck. We hardened the structure so that if we do have a fire, our property will be standing. Problem is, we thought we were gonna get insurance benefits, only to find out that our premiums went up, because according to our carrier, we're in a low risk zone. Their maps are not updated. We were not gonna tell them that they need to update it. But the thing is, they should know that we're in a high risk zone. And to them, the only important thing to them is the roof replacement for hail damage. So even though I said everybody else in the neighborhood burned down, ours will be up and standing, we don't have to rebuild. Why would our cost to rebuild have anything to do with it if we're still standing? But to them, it doesn't matter. So, I'm talking to my neighbors since we did our project. One of the neighbors has replaced their roof. 2 of them are replacing their siding with cement board, and another one is tearing down their cedar siding to put up Class A fire retardant materials. So, in closing, I just want to thank you all for adopting this. It's very important. I've got all my neighbors on board. I'm just one person, but I'm having an impact on getting people to do the right thing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment? All right, I will close the public comment period and story with us.
I'd add, thank you for being a role model. I mean, it's through your examples that you're influencing your neighbors, and that's what we all need to do.
All right, we'll keep moving. Council staff comments, new business. We'll start with Councilor Krasinski.
Cool. I feel like every time I say something like this, but actually on April 1st, which is a Wednesday, not a joke, but a real thing, we are having our first, not just planning, but community come meet and hang with the councilors meeting. There's no formal agenda, it's really just a come meet, talk to us, tell us what you feel, we can tell you how we feel about different things, and get to know us, because we wanna know you, and I think this is the first real one we're doing, and this is for District 1, which includes Ward 1 and Ward 2. They can add any comments, it is at 6:30 to 7:30, I believe, 6 to 7:30, and is at the Natural Grocers Community Space. So, come find us there, and we can talk about it some more probably next meeting, so thank you so much.
I'll just be quick. We touched on the fact that affordability was one of the issues that came up in the survey that we saw the results of last month. And I just want to touch on a couple of things. The City of Golden has an emerald ash borer subsidy program, which helps you remove your ash tree or treat it. So you can go online, and again, that's where the city can help. The City of Golden has a sales tax refund, if you weren't aware of it. This is targeted at seniors, seniors, low-income residents, and disabled residents. Again, you can go online and find the details on this. The key thing on this one is it has to be in by April 15th, so that's only, basically a month away. The amazing Golden Rebate Program from the sustainability teams. Again, take advantage of this in order to get, if you're buying batteries or something for your home or solar, to see if any of these rebates are applicable. I wanted to make a plug. Thank you for raising our wildfire mitigation. 2 weeks ago, I had my free home wildfire mitigation evaluation by our fire department. It's been going on for a couple of years now. I'm embarrassed to say that Beverly Heights, where I live, actually has the lowest number of those evaluations. So I urge Beverly Heights residents to give them a ring and set up your free evaluation. It comes out with a nice list of things that you can do to help harden your home, which again, we heard a little bit at public comment. And finally, I just wanted to touch on, right now is the annual resident tree sale. So you can go buy a tree that's, and plant it in your yard at a discount. That's about $85 for a 7-gallon pot. So again, these are different projects, programs that the city is right now that helps make things more affordable. I'll stop.
Thank you.
Nothing for me tonight, thank you.
One last plug for boards and commissions. Applications are due next Monday. Strongly encourage you to apply. We have over 20 vacancies this year, and hopefully get some really good applicants.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that at Guru last night, we saw the presentation from the Junction, and it was mention of expanding our urban renewal areas, and so we did allow for a contract to be created to do a study of the Junction property. And I want people to understand that urban renewal isn't just about blight, it's also about difficult to develop properties that may only be developed if they get some tax advantage, and that's the case for the Junction. It's so far north that they're gonna have to put in a lift station, for example, to lift their sewer waste uphill so they can come back downhill in Golden. So you can imagine how much it costs to do that. It's a pressurized pipe, that adds expense. So I just want to point out that it is appropriate that that we look at a URA even there, and people might say, why are you doing it? And also just reiterate that, the sustainability event that happened with residents where there was vendors and others talking about hardening your electrical supply and batteries and such was so popular and so highly touted by staff and others that GURA has decided to fund something similar for businesses, obviously in the URA areas, but they'll also share that information with the rest of the community so that they can benefit from whatever we figure out makes sense for grants and other opportunities. So that's it from URA.
I love the annual tree sale. Thank you for bringing that up. So it's a reminder, one of my first favorite things in Golden when I first moved here. Also, the Highway 93 analysis and design page is on Guiding Golden. I would encourage folks to please visit. I know it feels like we've been talking about it for forever, but we have. And we will continue talking about it until we get to where we want to be. So that's where we need community input. There's also a meeting for community input on Thursday, March 19th at the Golden Community Center. I believe it's 5 to 6:30 p.m.
Excellent. I just want to reiterate the boards and commissions openings. Say thank you to all the boards and commissions who presented during study session. It takes a lot of time, but it's really rewarding to be a volunteer for the city. The boards and commissions do amazing work on their own, and then advisory to council. If you're interested in still thinking about applying, all of their work plans for 2026 are on the agenda for this evening, so you can check them out and see what they're focusing their time on for this year. But yeah, it's always great to have a lot of great applicants every year. We have amazing people step up. I wanted to mention another meeting next week besides the Highway 93, and that is on Monday. Clayworks is having a community meeting or a neighborhood meeting. It is an update from them about their project. So I get lots of questions from people about what's going on, what are they gonna do next, when are they moving in? If you have those questions too, they're having a neighborhood meeting and you are all invited on Monday. I believe I wrote down it's from 4 to 5:30 p.m. and it is at the old high school at the American Mountaineering Museum. So if you are interested in what's going on with Clayworks, that meeting is on Monday. And I think that's all I had. Anything from you? Okay, we'll keep moving on. Next up we have consent matters. Is there much regarding consent?
Move to approve consent matters as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, consent matters are adopted as were presented. Next up, we do have one proclamation this evening, and it is for Arts Education Month, which is March 2026.
Whereas arts education, which comprises a rich array of disciplines such as dance, media arts, music, film, and theater arts, visual art, and more, is a well-rounded subject and it is an essential element of the complete education for all students. And whereas a substantive visual and performing arts curriculum enables students to develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills, imagination and creativity, discipline and collaboration, alternative ways to communicate and express feelings and ideas, and cross-cultural understanding, which support academic success. And whereas arts education contributes to increased attendance and graduation rates, elevates academic achievement, enhances social and emotional learning, and paves the way for students to achieve college, career, and citizenship readiness. And whereas to succeed in today's economy, students must masterfully develop skills that business leaders demand in a 21st century workforce, including the ability to be creative, communicate effectively, collaborate with peers, think critically, and innovate. And whereas the arts are a valued and integral part of life, are essential for complete education, and contribute immensely to the vibrancy and vitality of communities and the nation. And whereas the City of Golden, Colorado recognizes the need to expand equitable access to quality arts education to serve all students. Whereas the City of Golden's Arts and Culture Commission seeks
hearing. And each of these items we've talked about previously at City Council. And it is time to have further discussion and take a vote. First one is our historic preservation topic, ordinance 2288.
Alright, good evening, council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present on second reading for the ordinance 2288, our rewrite of our chapter 1858 code. I'm going to give a very brief presentation since I gave a pretty lengthy presentation last week, so I'm just going to kind of go over the highlights and some things you've seen before, as well as a couple the change requests by council for review. So the goal of the rewrite process was to update our processes, modernize the language, add definitions, add clarity, and address the policy issues not only brought up in the community, but by the policy study. The end result was a comprehensive rewrite of the 1858, which included updated processes and procedures for certificates of appropriateness, spelling out each type of certificate of appropriateness, looking at the designation process, and also looking at the different designations themselves, and sort of wrapping that all with brand new definitions, ensuring that we had clear order of operations and enforcement procedures. So one thing that council asked us to look into this evening was a potential red line to the revocation section. The red line has been provided in your packet, as well as I have Mr. Markley here to answer any questions you may have on that section. But as staff reviewed council's comments on this section, we recognize that there are some potential updates that could occur, and really just aligning the designation criteria with revocation criteria, and also parsing out revocation of a property within a district versus revocation of a particular individual historic site. So that red line has been provided to council, and staff does recommend approval of that red line, as it just adds more clarity for property owners and kind of gives some clarity on the process for getting out the districts or individual designation, how that goes. So there's the red line that's been provided. It's in your packet. Historic Preservation Board reviewed this on multiple occasions in 2025 and does recommend approval. Council reviewed it at study session in September 2025, and then also had first reading at February 24th. With that, it's the end of staff's presentation. Glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions?
So earlier in the study session, Councilor Cameron asked a question that is more appropriate for now. Can you talk a little bit about the teeth that you're adding and the enforcement mechanisms if an applicant does not follow what is approved by HB and by their plan?
Yeah, so first thing I want to address, and I didn't talk about this earlier, was that the code itself has a lot more definitions and processes outlined. So whereas before we didn't have a definition for demolition, for example, now there's a very clear definition of demolition in the code. So that in itself will allow the board the ability to review those cases that we know are going to be demolition much sooner than finding out later in the process. The other change that occurred in the code, it's not necessarily a change, I'd call it a clarification, would be that the board can enforce a certificate of appropriateness if the applicant agrees to that enforcement. So it does put in the penalty section of the code, which is section 1858-260, and it talks specifically about enforcement remedies and penalties. And so that would apply to anything that the board is empowered to enforce by the applicant. So kind of pairing those two sections together, we did not do a deeper we did not update the powers further, because that was not, we kind of, when we talked about this ordinance change, we talked about it as an update and not a drastic policy change. And so our intention would be new guidelines and context statements, which we are working on by providing those documents and having more information about the architectural style all the pieces are in place to do that enforcement, whether it's having specific information about an architectural style that we do not have currently, and ensuring that we have the right context for these districts, as the backbone of the board's review.
Follow up on that, you said if the applicant agrees, like, what is their incentive to agree to more oversight by HPD? Like, is that a condition of getting a certificate of appropriateness?
It would not be a condition, it would just be something they agree to if the board recommends approval, or, so it would be something they would specify in the resolution that they're agreeing to board oversight, on the application as presented. We know that sometimes things change, so in a case where you might have a construction project ongoing and something happens at that construction site, now if they agree to enforcement by the board, they would have to go back to the board to get their certificate of appropriateness. So it's still, the process has not changed as far as voluntary compliance, but it just gives the applicant the ability to, in good faith, when they're presenting their project to the community and to the board, to agree to that, oversight.
Counselor Kim?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask the same question in a different way. If it's only up to the applicant to say they're interested in this oversight, what would it take for us to say, your incentive to do it is that if you are not in compliance, whether you agree to or not, if you're not in compliance with the certificate of appropriateness, then we'll pull it. So their incentive is making sure that they continue to be in compliance. Do we not have a mechanism if they're not in compliance to pull it and say, you're not in compliance with what was agreed to? I'm not clear
So,
on how that would work.
yeah, and so then it would become a violation of the ordinance, and then there would be the ability to, either, so it outlines, and I'm just gonna kind of read through quickly, for example, 2B, if work is performed that materially differs from the certificate of appropriateness, the director may order the owner to submit a revised application for a certificate of appropriateness for the new work. If there is a building permit, for which no certificate of appropriateness exists, then the building permit can be denied, revoked, or stopped. If something is demolished in violation of the chapter, the director can order that the property be returned to its condition prior to the unlawful work. And that's for a historical landmark in particular. And there's also the administrative violations under chapter Title 8 that can also be enforced. So our current code really has a very much shortened section. This section is much more scenario based, so it gives clear guidance on what may happen. But in the case that they do agree to board oversight, then they would be under this penalties and remedies chapter enforcement.
Okay, so I think that the right answer is their incentive is to not be in violation, and if they're under the guidance and the oversight of the board, they're less likely to be in violation.
Correct.
Okay, making that clear helps me understand it.
I think I can add maybe a little clarification as well. I would say, generally speaking, except for the full landmarks, which are under the mandatory control of the board in terms of their recommendations, for the other types of designations, I would say our program guarantees like a process, but not necessarily an outcome. So the process is bringing those plans in, having those reviewed, getting the recommendations. But ultimately, as our code is now and as the draft is, that the owner can still then, do what they would like to do, even if it doesn't comply with the recommendations. But in terms of the process, if they bring a set of plans in and those are evaluated, and then they end up doing something significantly different than that, then there is a compliance issue there. And we made that more clear in the new language that at that point, if you do significantly differ than from what was reviewed, then you might have to come back or have it reviewed further, so. But I would say that to change the recommendations to be generally mandatory would be a pretty significant policy change that I think would be outside of what we were trying to do for this particular stage.
This might be a little more detailed, but is it always part of the process, generally speaking, to put forward that they're going to be under board supervision going forward? Or is it just like sometimes it's under board supervision? It seems like it's optional to do that, is what I'm getting.
So the current, way that the ordinance is written, it's not a requirement to do it either way. So the new ordinance gives us clear direction on using that provision of the code and how it works, and how it's enforced.
I'm still not clear on the voluntary part of this. So in a historic district, to do work, they have to come to HPV. And so when they come to HPV, they can agree to be under board supervision or not agree to that, right? Is that what you're saying?
The way I would put it is that, so the default setting is that the board can give recommendations. What the owner applicant can do is agree to those recommendations on the record, and those become part of the resolution, the approval, and they become enforceable as part of the building permit process. And also by the department director, just pursuant to the general authority that they have in the code. So, does that help?
Okay, so next step. If they don't get a certificate of appropriateness, if it's denied, they don't get their building permit, their demolition permit for 6 months. And that's still in the code?
I wouldn't, for your average home that is not a landmark, and they're just doing some kind of work on their house, it's not a matter really of denial or granting or denial, it's a review. And if the board doesn't have any recommendations, then the review takes place. They move forward as they were going to. Or if there are recommendations, the board makes the recommendations, and then the applicant can take those into account voluntarily, or they can up the ante even more and say we fully agree to those and we want them to be a condition. And that's how the current system works. So we're carrying that forward.
At what point is the certificate of appropriateness granted or denied? And what is the change in that process in this new code?
So it's when the board is done with their review, for that type of, if they're not going for like state incentives or things like that, where the board's authority is not present to actually make that grant or deny, it's just completing the review. So once that resolution is complete and they've either made the recommendations or they don't have any recommendations because it's appropriate, that is then the end of the COA process. They've done their COA review. So you could think of it as granting it, but it's really that review that has taken place, and that's completed with the resolution.
So to be clear, they get a COA, and we have previously not really enforced, it seems, giving the COA. Like, we've had people violate terms, and we never pulled their COA to my knowledge. But will this change make it more clear that we will, in fact, if they get their COA during the review, but then do something different, and it's considered substantial, which I always am bothered by the word substantial, but will we be enforcing or even pulling COAs whether or not a person agrees to be in compliance? Because my sense is that if they're not in compliance, whether they agree to be reviewed or not, it's still a violation of the code.
If they have, the crucial point is that if they have done something materially or significantly different than what was reviewed, then yes, the language is clear on that point, that process, that review process is mandatory. So even if ultimately they could do something other than what the recommendations were, the process of having their project, their plans reviewed is still mandatory. So if they come up with something totally different and they wanna do that, then yes, they would be in violation of the process and would, that could be, stop work could occur and send it back to the board, that kind of thing.
So, one note, about the certificate of appropriateness, that is our local process. If the property is going for tax credits or going for further work at the state level, the state will ask for their certificate of appropriateness and compare the work that occurred to the board's approval. So, while it may not, the process itself is part of our local code, if there is further action at the state level on the property, they would, the board's certificate of appropriateness is part of that process.
I'm gonna ask a question, because it details it out in the ordinance about the review process, and they can find it appropriate with recommendations, and inappropriate. If the review is inappropriate, they can still go forward with their project. There's no denial of a project, there's just a finding of inappropriate, but it's not preventing them from moving forward with a building project. Is
Right.
that-
That's correct. So they don't, it wouldn't necessarily change them being able to move forward with the project, but the board can, let's say we had a project recently where, somebody came forward and the board did not agree to what they wanted to do, and they denied the certificate of appropriateness. So there is no certificate of appropriateness for this particular property. So that is something the board can do. They can deny it, but they also can approve it with recommendations, and that's often a very powerful tool for the board to use, because as they're reviewing these projects, they can say, well, hey, did you think about this? Or maybe the public comes in and says, there's some important feature that you all didn't see or consider, in the plans. So it's very helpful for the board to have that ability to put conditions on a property and give those recommendations, and often through that public process and that public review process, we're able to make changes to these properties that give them, more, well, not always, but we try, the changes are more acceptable or accepted by the community after that public review. So it is sort of hand in hand with that review process, and it's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, the review process, happens, I get it. You keep saying deny, but in the language it says it's a finding that's inappropriate. But they will actually, in the resolution, say they've denied their certificate of appropriateness, because I didn't read in here denial as a outcome of the review, so.
It's tricky because it, to me, doesn't make sense to say it's denied when then they can just do the work. So that's what I was trying to finesse
Yeah.
there, in terms of, they're gonna have that finding of inappropriate, but when you can just go ahead and do the work, it's confusing to call it a denial. So trying to work out that
So-
confusing aspect, to the extent we succeeded at, I guess it could be, succeeded could be a question, but we have kind of a confusing idiosyncratic system, so we're trying to lay it out as clearly as we can.
So my interpretation of what you're saying is, review happens on all of them. If the outcome is a finding of inappropriate, there is no issuing of a certificate at that point. So you could call it a denial, but basically there's no action to then issue a certificate of appropriateness if the finding's inappropriate.
That's
Is that
correct.
Okay.
And if it's inappropriate, if the certificate of appropriateness is denied, is there, I remember something about, like, the demolition permit is 6 months delayed, if that is denied, is that correct?
190 days is the maximum extent of the demolition stay,
Okay,
yeah.
is that still in the code now?
Yes.
It is, okay. I'm still hung up on the voluntary, non-voluntary. Are the penalties and enforcements of the violations the same whether they agree to it or not? Like, if a project comes along, gets a certificate of appropriateness and is deemed appropriate, and the moves forward and does something completely different. Walk me down the two scenarios if they agreed to oversight and if they didn't.
Okay, so, and when you say different from what they presented to the board?
Different from what they presented, what the board deemed appropriate.
In that case, so if they have agreed, well, so it's a little hard to explain, but if they have agreed to the recommendations, then those all become fully enforceable. Even if they didn't originally have those in their proposal, but they get that input and they say, okay, we agree to all these recommendations. Then if they don't follow those recommendations, then that would be a violation. If they didn't agree to the recommendations, they're still held to their plans that they brought in, that they proposed. So the agreement that they are doing is agreeing to those extra recommendations that the board had. So then those become binding. But if they didn't agree to that, then they don't have to follow the recommendations. But if they nonetheless ended up doing something different from what they proposed, that can also be enforced as not having been reviewed.
So, okay, if it is approved with recommendations, but they don't agree to the recommendations and they wanna go with their original, is that considered, do they get a certificate of appropriateness?
I would say they do.
But if it was only approved with the recommendations from the board and the original one was not deemed appropriate and they chose not to follow the recommendations, why would they get a certificate of appropriateness?
Because the board only has the power to recommend in the majority of situations.
So why would the board, under what circumstances would the board make these recommendations or say recommend approval with these recommendations? And then, like, why would they do that instead of having the applicant come back and with the changes? Why wouldn't they just deny it?
They don't have the power to do that.
But they have the power to not grant it.
Well,
I was
I'll
gonna
let
say,
you.
one thing that they can do, the board, is let's say that the board is discussing recommendations. They can ask the applicant if they agree to those recommendations. And if the applicant says, whatever, if they say no, then the board isn't going to recommend, most likely, approval of that or recommend the certificate of appropriateness in that case. So oftentimes before that vote is held, they know whether or not the applicant is going to agree to those conditions or recommendations in addition to on the certificate of appropriateness.
But Lauren, that's different than what you just said, was they would still approve the certificate of appropriateness with just out the conditions. It's almost as if it's pro forma. I mean, the way you described it, it becomes pro forma where you approve it with or without recommendations. That's what I heard. If that's not what I was supposed to hear, then please clarify, but it doesn't sound to me like you have a process for denial.
Let me clarify Mr. Markley's comments about the board vote. So what the board votes on is up to the board. I just give you my experience that generally, if the reason why the board would issue the certificate of appropriateness is because of conditions, it'll be very clear that what they're going to be doing. And they ask the applicant if they agree to those conditions. The board could still, as Mr. Markley stated, approve the certificate or issue the certificate of appropriateness, or they could not issue the certificate of appropriateness. It would be up to the board, given the circumstances that they, as part of their hearing. So I think there is some nuance there with that process, and it really just depends on the discussion, the type of condition that we're talking about. And every house in Golden is
special, so there's no such thing as a uniform, thing with historic preservation, every house is different, so each discussion is unique.
Thank you.
Are there other council questions?
I have more. Nobody else does.
Sure.
Okay, so I understand there's every house in Golden is unique, but the process shouldn't be unique to every house. Like, what I'm concerned about is the ambiguity. So when the board would the board ever, in code, would they be allowed to make, approval with recommendations, or approve with recommendations that the applicant didn't agree to? Not in practice, but in code.
They can make whatever recommendation that they wish to. I think what the code is the applicant can agree or not agree to those conditions, so both scenarios are possible.
So there's a scenario where the board makes, approval with recommendations, the applicant doesn't agree to it, but they have their certificate of appropriateness with those recommendations that they are not held to, that because they didn't agree to, right?
Correct, so the board would, in that case, they can say, these are the plans we would approve with these conditions. And they can still say that, and the applicant can go tomorrow and say, great, I'm gonna do something completely different, and I'm gonna turn my building permit tomorrow for something else, cause I don't want to do this project in this way or these conditions, and that can still occur. So that scenario is possible with the way that this is drafted, because of the voluntary compliance nature of the code. The board is always looking to make sure they recommend what they want to be out there talking about, what would meet the certificate of appropriateness, what kind of project meets those requirements, for their review. So, what the applicant decides to do or not do is up to the applicant after the meeting.
In that case, where the board approved recommendations that the applicant did not agree to, and they went and turned in a plan the next day, because they had an approved certificate that they didn't agree to, but it was approved, would that allow the 190-day, delay of the permit? Or is that triggered only in cases of denial?
The 180 days is only triggered when it comes to demolition specifically, so it's, unless I'm incorrect. But just a clarity point that may be helpful is, the board's certificate of appropriateness is good for the plans that they approved. So it doesn't necessarily, if somebody builds something that was not given the certificate of appropriateness, unless they come back to the board and look at it again, it doesn't have, those plans are not, that project does not have, it has a certificate of appropriateness, but it doesn't have, it's not the plans that were approved, and it doesn't meet the requirements of their approval. So that's kind of I don't know if that helps in how it's described, but that's kind of how it works with the certificate of appropriateness. There is, Lucas, you can maybe jump in, but I don't believe there's a delay when somebody does not follow certificate of appropriateness. The delays are only related to, let's say, a stop work order is put on because of a building permit issue, or they're demolishing something, specific to demolition, and not to approval or issuance of the certificate of appropriateness in either scenario.
If the building plan and the certificate of appropriateness, or the plan that comes to HB if those are in lockstep, any deviation from that would trigger a stop work permit or any of the.
Right, so they could come back and say, this is not what we approved, that you need to come back to the board and we need to stop work and look at what's happening out here and see if there's a solution forward. And the board will look at the facts of the case conservation issue, they weren't anticipating something along those lines, or they just decided to do something completely different altogether, without notifying the board first, or staff and the board, we would have them come back and the board can look at those plans and make sure that the certificate of appropriateness as issued and complied with is what they said they would do, or they need to make changes to it.
I'm gonna move us on. We're stuck on this point, so you can think about it more, but I am gonna move us on so we don't continue to, go back and forth on this point. If there are no other council questions about different parts of the ordinance, I'm gonna open up the public hearing. And then, if there are further questions of staff, we can go at that point, but then we can deliberate. So I'm gonna open the public hearing on ordinance 2288. If anyone would like to speak to this ordinance, you're welcome to now. Seeing no one excitedly jumping up, I will close the public hearing and we will move on. Are there further questions about the ordinance or the modification that was presented since first reading? Any questions on that piece?
Now, I would like to thank you for that modification and clarity around, how somebody could get out of the district and taking out the extremely restrictive, wording. So, thank you for that. This is not meant to be the same topic, but, talk about stress testing. The property that demolished more than anticipated, including over a weekend, would this new code have given us any leverage over what they did to pull their certificate of appropriateness or something? And you know which property I'm talking about.
Yes.
So would this have changed that scenario? That's a stress test in my mind.
So, just for the public's, reference, the property I believe you're speaking about is 1014 12th Street, the blue house, blue brick house. So this code, the first thing it would have done was, if we would have known their demolition plans, or to that level, and had a definition for demolition, we would have been able to look at that as part of their certificate of appropriateness and part of their review. So that would have been more upfront known. There's also things in here in demolition that talk about the types of studies that need to be looked at for demolition, and it gives us specificity in types of documents, such as the structural report and other documents that weren't specified before. They give us more information about a structure and give the board more information about structure as they're reviewing a project. That project, we were able to utilize some of the administrative capacity of the code to get them to come back to the board. They did so. We had them come back to the board anyways and take a look at the project and present on the project. That was after they had moved, further along. I think the code as written would have been much clearer on the process for what happened out there. And the code also we would have known up front much sooner that was gonna be the case, that they were demolishing a lot more of that house than they had originally, planned on, and that we could have enforced on that as well.
Whether they agreed to it or not, you could have enforced on it.
Well, the demolition piece, cause they didn't have a certificate of appropriateness for demolition, but in this, because the line in the old code was not clear either way, so now we have a clear, if you're demolishing more than 50%, you have to get a certificate of appropriateness for demolition.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question, about the process that the Historic Preservation Board went through to make this recommendation to us. Many of them were on the board the whole time for this process, so I know maybe there were some new folks. But were there, detailed conversations using past projects as examples that they were trying to address in this code?
Absolutely. So the board, not only looked at past projects during this review process of this ordinance, but also in the policy study. Those cases were reviewed by our consultants, to give us policy recommendations that informed a lot of the work that was done in this code. So, those community conversations that have been happening for the past 2 years, and this is sort of the last been at least this part of the conversation. We'll continue forward with the guidelines and some potential, looking at how to, pair the guidelines with the code and sort of look at how those are layered. So that is a conversation that will be had in the future.
Thank you. Further questions before we discuss?
Mayor, if I can make a point of
Oh, yes.
order about the ordinance itself. There was a misnumber in the second reading draft of the code. It's in section 1858.120. It should read, number 3, staff review, number 4, burden of proof, and number 5, recordation. The number in front of staff review is not there, so, staff would recommend that maybe the city attorney can ensure it worded this correctly, that we amend or, recommend amending that.
Yeah, we're bringing it to council's attention that there's a typographical error in the, second reading ordinance that was not in, first reading ordinance. So the first reading ordinance did not have a typo, second reading does, but, if council gets to the point where they want to maybe adopt this ordinance, then, we can take care of it in the motion. In addition to that, the language that we've provided in attachment 5, that has the, amended wording of the revocation of designation, that is all proper and there are no typos in that one, so.
It's not labeled as an exhibit or appendix, so
I
it's
know,
not an
it's-
easy, let's
I
adopt
know.
that.
It's page 41.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you. All right, I think we're at a point we can accept a motion on ordinance 2288 and have council discussion. Someone like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2288 with a typo in section 1858.120 corrected upon adoption.
A second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I'm gonna start by asking council, if you would like to adopt the amended 1858.120, section 4, that is represented on page 41 of our packet. Any discussion on that section?
I would just say, yes, I would like it adopted and would not approve it without it.
Would you like to make an amendment to, adopt that new section?
I would also recommend the adoption of the redlined section on page 41 of burden of proof as rewritten since first reading.
As an amendment?
As an amendment.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
Okay, so we'll vote first on the amendment, which is specifically related to this section, 1858.120, section 4. Any further discussion on it? Yes?
Was this in the first reading? The section, the 1858.120, the revocation?
It was.
It was in there, but what's changed is in section 4 under burden of proof.
Mhm.
It's a red line so you can see the track changes. That's what's different from what was in the first reading.
And has that been reviewed by HEB?
No, we would have to go back to the board to review that, but based on the discussions we've had around the code, I do believe that HPD would likely be fine with this, approve it. As it adds more clarity.
It adds more clarity, but it also, lightens the load to be removed from a historic district. Is that right?
I wouldn't say it lightens the load, I think it just is more clearly aligns with the criteria for inclusion or designation, so it just pairs up a little more specifically, as the approval process. I would just say the only factor would be time.
second to amend with the red line language, as we can see. If there are no further questions or discussion, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, 2 noes, 5, no. 5, yes. Ayes, the amendment passes, like we all are here. I can add. All right, so we have an amended ordinance on the table for a vote. Any further discussion on the amended 2288? Before we take a vote, Councilor Evans.
I'm still uncomfortable with what I feel to be how unclear, some of this designation is, and it relies a lot on, behaviors and actions of the board, and not as much on the code. So what I heard a lot from staff was this is how we do it, but I don't see that reflected in, the ordinance, and so I'm gonna vote no on it.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Councilor Cameron?
I have to agree with Counselor Evans, and the fact that we had to ask those detailed questions about what would happen in such and such a scenario indicates that there's too much nuance and it's not, as narrowly controlled as I think would be appropriate for the right things to take place. So I think I will join the no vote.
Thank you. Anyone else? Before we take a vote? Councilor Wilson?
Yeah, I'm just gonna third that, but, also what I keep getting caught up on too is like in that scenario where we demolished more than we should have, we had a definition for demolish, so I'm like, that's pretty cool, cause we can protect more things, but at the same time, we find it confusing, and I feel like public will find it more confusing, but I know there is space in the future potentially. I would really harp on that, maybe being used too, to re-review some of these things, cause it is a lot, I get it. Thank you.
And I'm voting for it, while the examples in the past were certainly problems in the past that reflected an ordinance that did not meet our needs today, the process over the last 2 years with the consultant, with the community conversations, and with our volunteer historic preservation board who actually do the decision-making here, we do not as city council. When these cases come forward, I have full confidence that they have looked at all scenarios and considered their process of how they do this and how they work with staff and how they issue decisions. And that they unanimously recommended this as a better process, a better ordinance, more clarity in what they do. I'm fully supportive of that work that they have done, so I will be voting yes. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead, please.
I will also be voting yes. Again, I'm coming in with some bias, having previously served on Historic Preservation Board. Again, I want to reiterate, I understand the nuance can be challenging. We're talking about working with folks on their personal property ownership rights. So that is why it's nuanced, and that is why it's challenging to talk about. I appreciated the call out for stress testing, and I'm appreciative for staff in their presentation and that they were able to touch back on that. The development of this code was very much using cases in the last, I want to say, at least 3 to 5 years to do that stress testing for what was known. I'm sure there are future stress tests that will be discovered, but I was pleased to hear that come out in the presentation, that yes, that stress testing had been done using real life, true cases in the very unique circumstances that is historic preservation in Golden. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, yes, go ahead.
I will also be voting yes for all the reasons that Councilor Connect listed this evening. Thank you very much.
Right, I think we have, the motion and a second on the amended ordinance 2288, and I will ask our, city clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Connect?
Aye.
Counselor Cameron?
Nay?
Counselor Evans?
No.
Mayor Weinberg?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Vidry?
Aye.
Counselor Fab?
Yes.
Counselor Krasinski?
No.
It's 4 to 3.
Thank you. The ordinance passes, thank you, and thanks to the Historic Preservation Board for all the work on this.
I will pass that on. Thank you.
All right, we're moving to ordinance 2290, which is amending Title 15 to add a new chapter for the Wildfire Resiliency Code.
short presentation, really. So if there really just a questions, if anybody has any questions.
So I will just state that we had a full conversation, at our last, city council during our regular business meeting, in addition to the study session that we had previously, that you are coming forward with no changes from the discussion on first reading. So what we see before us is exactly what we had before us for discussion last meeting. Okay, just wanted to get all that on the record. Council, do we have any questions, at this time? Yes, go ahead.
How soon do we talk about, it might be a counter question, but how soon do we talk about reviewing this again?
I believe it was, by the end of the third quarter of this year, maybe. I don't actually remember.
I recall us having a little bit of a conversation that we are also working on updating our golden, plan.
Sure.
And that is ongoing this year as well, and so the sequencing or timing of that review, this might be reviewed at the time that that comes forward. If that's what everyone else recalls.
That sounds great, yeah.
Okay.
My memory is 1 year.
Any other, questions?
Point of clarification real quick, the map is not required to be reviewed, but every 3 years, so I just wanted to say that.
By state law.
Say that, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop us from
Correct.
reviewing it earlier.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Does that timer reset if we review it, say in like a couple months for that 3 year, maybe that's too in the weeds, but.
That's a great question, I can ask the actual board for information once we get there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
3 years after you did that.
Sure.
That's a good question. I've only run 3 years from now, so. Someone else can remember this conversation. Okay, if there are no further questions, I am gonna open the public hearing on this ordinance and, invite anyone up to the podium if you'd like to speak on ordinance 2289, no, 2290. My apologies. All right, seeing no one come up to speak to 2290, I'll close the public hearing. And, council, if we have no questions of staff, we can entertain a motion and then have our discussion. Seeing no hands, would someone like to make a motion regarding ordinance 2290?
Move adoption of ordinance 2290, Golden Wildfire Resiliency Code.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, comments, thoughts before we take a vote? Councilor Evans?
So does adopting 2290 automatically adopt map A as it's written, or do we have a separate vote on which map to adopt?
It's already part of it.
So, map A.
It's map A. That's what was approved on first reading and that's what's up for second. Yep.
So we don't need a separate.
No.
It's already written in there. Good question. I looked at the recommended, language. Anyone else? Any thoughts? I know we've talked about this one a lot and really appreciate you answering all of our questions previously. I know for folks, it seems like we haven't thought about this and we're not having a lot of discussion, and that's because we've talked about it previously. Councilor Pugh?
Just positive, supportive thoughts, not just for the tremendous work from staff and the consideration and some of the variability around what's going on with the state and our reaction to it, and, makes me proud of, our city, that we are one of the cities who's able to, adopt within the timeline originally outlined, even if it ends up being amended, to account for other municipalities. And I also just wanna emphasize the, appreciation I have for the folks who came forward and provided public comment. This has been a huge topic of conversation, not just within us here at council, but I feel like any human that we are working out there in the community with. So I am excited to see this move forward.
Any thoughts? Yes.
I am certainly supportive of all of our local work that has gone into this ordinance. The only thing I am not in support of is the state work that has gone in to this ordinance, which is Exhibit A, the state wildfire map. I believe that this map does not take into the true topography of Golden, I believe it does not accurately reflect the wildfire risk in our neighborhoods. I believe that the attached map C, Exhibit C, which is called the Enhanced Structural Protection Wildfire Map, is the map that we should adopt in this ordinance. We have heard that it was the initial recommendation of staff during the study session on February 10th. We know we've had experts speak to us. Golden deserves better than the state creating a wildfire plan for us. We have our experts here. I think that they deserve to be heard. I think our map C, again, accurately reflects what we need to acknowledge as far as wildfire risk in our neighborhoods in Golden. So I will be voting no on this ordinance unless Exhibit A is replaced with the Exhibit C, Enhanced Structural Protection Wildfire Map.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Counselor?
I agree with Counselor Vitry that, map C is more Golden specific, it more matches our CWPP map, and I think it is the appropriate map that we should be adopting. I think all the rest of the work that has gone into this is fantastic, and I do feel like I appreciate the Golden specific changes made to the code, and so I think, in line with that, making Golden specific changes to the map is appropriate, and I would support a change to map C instead.
Counselor Cameron, did you have anything?
Yeah, two comments. One is I want to thank our public speaker from earlier. I was actually going to comment, but didn't get a chance to say thank you for hardening your house. And looking at satellite view of 86 to France Way, I will just reiterate what I said in first reading. It comes down to homeowners and what they do. Our guest speaker tonight has very little growth around his house, and depending on how old this picture is, his neighbor's trees are basically like little matchsticks adjacent to the house. It really comes down to individual actions, and whether we pass this or not, map A, map C, education of our citizens about trade-offs, it needs to be at the forefront of whatever we do. I will also just suggest that Councilor Vitry and Councilor Evans propose an amendment, and see how it goes, and then vote for the ordinance. I would prefer that we vote on the map separately, if you wanna make that point, but I think it's better that the city, council fully get behind this ordinance, so that we can be in compliance with the state requirements and show that we do care about incorporating this into our code. So I'm not gonna make that motion, but I would suggest that that would be a different way to approach things.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment and others can raise their hands as they think. I appreciate all the work on getting us here. I know it's a state-led, initiative, and they follow their own schedule and then tell us what our schedule should be. Really appreciate putting in all the time to meet, the arbitrary deadline that they set, for us. Also understand that this is separate from our Golden Wildfire Protection Plan, that is specific to our Golden community and has had input in it and will continue to have input as we revise it. My concerns around anything beyond just the state law requirements of the code is that we've not had any community input on going beyond the state law, which would include a different map than what the state presented. We have not had a chance to have neighborhood meetings like we did on our own Golden plan. And so I would strongly like to make sure that if we were to make changes, go just like we did with the energy codes, where we went above and beyond, and we had our volunteer advisory board significantly looking in, having meetings where the public were invited, that we would do the same here. It is people's properties, their neighborhoods, and so if we are going to do something beyond what's prescribed by state law, that we have opportunity for them to
to weigh in the future, whatever the timeline is that we're looking at these things later on, next year, a year from now, whatever that might be. So I just wanted to put that in, to make sure that we're incorporating that public engagement piece, beyond what the state has said we need to do. Other thoughts? Yes.
I just want to point out that we have already gone above and beyond state requirements in the actual code without any public engagement, because we relied on the expertise of our building and fire professionals. So I don't know that, public engagement on that, on the map is, as necessary as it is for some of our other, public engagement processes.
Agree to disagree, but thank you for saying that. Other comments? We do have a motion. Yeah, more discussion. Yeah, I'm gonna go to Emily first, because I don't think she's, since we had a motion, and then we'll come back to you.
I do really wanna revisit this, and I think it would be good to revisit. I'm gonna vote to keep it the way it is for now, but I do think it's really good to revisit, and it sounds like we're doing it potentially this year, and we'll have a better idea of how things go. But yeah, thank you for all your effort.
This may be a question for our city attorney. It's my understanding with the state law that we must adopt a map with this ordinance, is that correct?
That's correct.
By April 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, that is, that with enforcement on July 1st. Other discussion? We do have a motion in a second. Just want to give opportunity for a call vote.
I will move, let's make an amendment.
Okay.
I move to amend ordinance 2290 by replacing the map that is Exhibit A with the current Exhibit C listed. That is the enhanced structural protection wildfire map.
Second. Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend?
Again, if you recall the arguments that we discussed in the past around unexpected consequences of maps that are more aggressive than what the state minimum is, I think Jay touched on a kind of an interesting point that in spite of everything he's done, his insurance rates went up. I'd hate to look at Jay and say, I adopted an aggressive map and your insurance rates went up more or were canceled or something unexpected happened. So I guess I stand with the state wildfire map right now until we have some time to see what the implications are, what's the impact of adopting this wildfire map on insurance policies. We all know that in April, the state is implementing a law that's gonna have more transparency to insurance issues. Brett, you touched on that in the past. It would be nice if that was behind us before we adopted a aggressive map. With that, I'll stop.
Other thoughts on the amendment or the motion to amend?
I'll just add that this is about risk, identifying risk and acknowledging risk of wildfire. So, that is why I am definitely pro Exhibit C, the enhanced structural protection wildfire.
Thank you. Any other thoughts for our call vote?
I just want to compliment my fellow counselors on their thoughtfulness. You know, we all have different thoughts, but everybody's being very thoughtful, and I just want to thank everybody for their thoughtfulness.
And just the last thing I want to say on this, the reason I changed my mind between the study session and first reading is seeing, our building department's estimation of the increased cost to be 2 to 3%. That is what they presented to us for, that it would cost individual homeowners to comply with the new code over the old code. And so that 2 to 3%, is, I think that's a worthy investment, in a larger portion of our community, and so that's why I'm in support of MAPC.
Alright, if there are no more comments, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Alright, the nays have it on the amendment. We will go forward with the original, ordinance 2290 as presented. I think we've talked about it enough, but if anyone has anything, I'll have one last call before we take a vote. Alright, all those in favor of ordinance 2290, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Alright, the ordinance passes 6-1 by my hearing, unless somebody corrects me. Thank you so much for all the work. We will be back, later this year with more conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council.
Alright, we have one more ordinance on second reading, and that is 2289, and that is for the Victim Compensation Fund, which we previously, talked about in a study session.
Hello, councilors, mayor, thank you for having me tonight. Like Mayor said, we did discuss this at study session on February 10th, and it was on first reading on February 24th. So I'm just gonna briefly run over it again, to just talk about it a little bit. So, currently when defendants are unable to pay court-ordered restitution, there's no mechanism within the court to ensure victims are compensated. To address this gap, the city created the VCF to provide out-of-pocket compensation to victims when restitution cannot be collected. So what we're talking about right now for this public hearing is ordinance 2289, which amends chapter 2.24 of the Old Municipal Code. This ordinance establishes the Victim Compensation Fund dedicated solely to victim compensation purposes. It authorizes council to establish a VCF fee assessed as court costs. It allows initial funding through transfer of forfeited municipal court bond amounts with discretion for future transfers by the city manager. It establishes a process allowing the municipal prosecutor to request disbursement from the fund within 6 months of a conviction or plea, subject to the approval of the presiding judge. And restitution will be ordered payable to the VCF when the fund has compensated a victim. So just quickly running through that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have on ordinance 2289.
Excellent, thank you. Questions? Questions? I know, I feel like it was, so well thought out when we talked about it in study session, I thought of no more questions. So. Alright, I will open the public hearing then, and we can keep thinking if we have any questions, but I'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2289. And,
I did have something about the, first, when we went over the first ordinance.
We're specific to this one now, yeah, we're only on 2289, which is the Victim Compensation Fund.
Okay.
So that's the one in front of us. Alright, I will close the public hearing, council, is anyone ready to make a motion on the ordinance?
Move to adopt ordinance number 2289.
Second?
thank you. Any further discussion, comments before we take a vote? Counselor Kim?
Yeah, one of the things I'd suggested in, study session about this was that we essentially allow funding from the city manager or some part of our budget that would allow you to, make some guesses at the beginning of the year that play out appropriately. Right now, the way we've set up this fund, it's sort of on an, it's obviously on an as-needed basis, but if the needs are greater in the beginning of the year and you have to sort of cut back on what you really desirably would have been able to give to somebody because you don't have the cash in the account, I just wonder how that'll play out.
That is why we have it scheduled for study session in November, so that we can look at what has been occurring in the account from March until November, and then we can make adjustments if we need to at that point.
Okay, so thank you for anticipating that need.
Anything further before we take a vote? Alright, all those favor of ordinance 2289, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ordinance passes unanimously. And related, our next item is a resolution, 3292, to establish, the standards for the fund we just approved.
So I'll quickly go over that as well. So the resolution 3292 adopts the standards and guidelines for the VCF and ensures that the VCF disbursements, are made only by, motion by the municipal prosecutor and thus the municipal judge with discretion to approve or deny requests. Establishes the VCF fee at $5 with annual adjustments of this limit in accordance with the state government statistics for the local inflation rate. This fee will be assessed as court costs on defendants who are found guilty, plead guilty, or plead no contest in court proceedings. Establishes a disbursement cap of $2,000 per case with annual adjustments of this limit in accordance with state government statistics for the local inflation rate. So those things were established through the study session, and we made the adjustments that were recommended by Councilor Cameron at the first reading as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the resolution.
Questions? No? So, okay. If there are no questions, then council, let's get a motion on the table for the resolution.
Motion to adopt resolution number 3292,
3292.
sorry.
Second.
Thank you. Further, comments? Thoughts?
Something that happened during this study session comes to mind. When Ross was talking about improvements to PC, I was like, well, I was on PC and we made PC incredible before I left. And then Emily was on PC and she made PC incredible before she left. And we've had a city clerk for decades, and yet here you are making things better. And so I just wanted to just compliment you on this whole process of coming up with this. And so just thank you. Just want to say that.
Thank you, Councilor Cameron, and I have to also credit the judge and the prosecutor because they did, and Elijah, they also did a very big lift with this project.
I think it's fantastic, and I am surprised more municipalities have not gone this route. So I think the standards and make a lot of sense, and a lot of things have been thought through to this together. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have resolution 3292, and somewhat related, but a little bit more, we have resolution 3293, which is updating our comprehensive fee schedule.
And that is me again, so I'll briefly speak about that. So resolution 3293 amends the fee schedule. I know we recently amended it at the end of last year, and we received feedback from council to improve and change how the fee schedule is presented and how it looks, and we do still have that on the plan for this year. So don't think that this is a final copy. We will still be making those adjustments that were requested. So the new resolution 3293 for the fee schedule includes the addition of the new $5 VCF fee, again with the annual adjustments. It reinstates sewer impact fees that were previously adopted by ordinance 2191. The impact fees for the multi-family user classes were inadvertently omitted from our previous fee update. It includes the council recommendation and direction that Parks and Rec provide an exception to the adopted fees for GCC admission and memberships for eligible residents in accordance with the recently developed expanded equity and access program policy. Any questions I can answer?
Councilor Kim?
Yeah, and I don't know if you can answer this, but I was confused by the red line about multifamily. It looked like there was a huge reduction in tap fees, or is that just a correction? Page 28 of the page 62 of the packet, residential multi-unit tap fee, I think it is, went from $8,400 to $1,600.
And I unfortunately can't speak to that. That was provided to me by Public Works.
Okay, I just was wondering if we had a reason for that reduction. It brings them more in line with other fees that are on here, but just, anyway, okay, that's all I had a question about.
No other questions? All right, let's get a motion regarding resolution 3293.
I'll move to approve resolution 3293, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Golden, updating the Golden Comprehensive Fee Schedule.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments, discussion before we take a vote? Yes?
I just wanna address Councilor Cameron's, comment on page 62. If I'm reading this right, it looks like the, 8474 stays as the water fee, but then the sewer fee in the next column over is the thing that was added.
Per your, per her comment, got it.
Yeah. So it's just the sewer fees that were changed, and there's nothing changing on the water fee column, or like the elimination of the 118 per square foot lot size.
Right, so there's a flat rate now for sewer independent of impermeable surface.
Yeah.
I'm sure they worked through those numbers, thank you.
So I'll just jump in and give some assurances. And so this was, intended to reflect something that was already in place before. We're just correcting and updating this to make sure that it matches what's already in the record. If that
Thank
gives you any comfort.
All right, any further comments before we take a vote? All those in favor of resolution 3293, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the resolution passes. We are at the end of our agenda, and